The UN, Reem Assalam, the UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls, gave an interview just a few days ago, earlier this week, in which she said she was shocked to learn that more than 15,000 rockets had been fired at Israel from Hamas and Hezbollah. She was shocked and encouraged someone to report that.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you twice monthly from Washington, D.C. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 200 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide. And if you like our show's content, spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by Google Books' just released unabridged audiobook edition of my global bestseller, IBM and the Holocaust. Thank you, Google. Thank you, audio team. And it's also co-sponsored by Phyllis in South Jerusalem. Thank you again, Phyllis. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the Villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and my favorite, Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from Australia, New Zealand, China, wow, Holland, Sweden, France again, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Hungary once again, Great Britain, of course, Canada, of course, Mexico, of course, India, Morocco, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question limited to today's topics, place one short sentence without preamble in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our always penetrating and unforgettable episode, Unanswered Questions, in a few minutes, after some brief announcements and then reports from the week. Announcements. At the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released more compelling and hard-hitting episodes. The latest is the painful and unforgettable must-see and must-share World War I, Why, which tragically ties a bloody and inexplicable war more than a century ago to all our problems in the world seen today, plus the Middle East and even directly to Hamas and its recent October 7th attack. My appearance tour continues. Last night, I appeared at the Gross Ramapo College Holocaust Center. Next week, I traveled to Wheeling to address eager people from West Virginia, Eastern Ohio, and Pittsburgh in a 3-part series, a leadership briefing, an interfaith gathering at Temple Shalom, and a special question-answer session for students at Wheeling High School. Get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com/events. And let's meet up in your city. Stand tall. I'm coming your way. Finally, I remind my viewers of a terrible website you must know about, publishing the ghoulish videos from October 7th. This is the war crime documentation Israel will need to prosecute after the war. See it at Hamas-massacre.net before the deniers win their war of denial. Items from the week, and I remind everyone here that we are now in the midst of World War J, the global war against the Jews, both in the Middle East, at home in America, and indeed roiling through the nations of the world. Now to the bad news, streaming into my office every minute of every day. I've selected just a few. The surging Jew hatred in the Democratic Party and the Biden administration that has been held hostage by the Arab Nazi wing is now threatening and insulting Israel daily to appease the no commitment vote in the Democratic primary, which in some states hit double digit. In Minnesota, it exceeded 45,000 votes, or more than 20% of the total. And so we see the spectacle of a witless Vice President Harris talking down to the Israeli government and derisively saying for consumption in Michigan that the administration wants to get food into the Gaza Strip and, quote, no excuses, close quote. Did you say you want the hostages back and no excuses? Did you say the daily bombardment of Israeli cities by well-fed Hamas battalions that are still operating at more than 50% strength? Did you say no excuses to ceasing that? And what about the video of the man in Gaza? Eve, I want you to post this in our show notes for everyone to see. He says, quote, we have a message for Hamas. Don't give up. No food. We will eat sand. Don't give up on anything. And we have a message for the Jews. This is in the Gaza video. Quote, we have already done October 7th, and there will be an October 8th, and October 9th, and also an October 10th. Or did you also perhaps see the video of strong men ceremoniously throwing the airdropped food packets from the United States government into the garbage? Or did you see the youngsters in Gaza instructed by their parents to throw rocks at the aid trucks, one almost fatally injuring an Egyptian driver? It's possible he may have died. They want this. They celebrate their elected and cherished leadership, Hamas, as it builds 750 kilometers of reinforced attack tunnels, but not one civilian bomb shelter. They want to kill our people, hold our women, our children, and men hostages, dance in the streets about the whole thing, but then have you pity them when the Hamas killers they glorify hoard the food. Israel has the right to defend itself, and it will not ask permission to survive. Kamala Harris, hear this. FDR and the Democratic Party did nothing to help the Jews during the Holocaust. You did not bomb one concentration camp. You did not liberate one concentration camp. You did not place a single stick of dynamite under even 1 meter of railroad track. You did not airdrop printed leaflets which were waiting to be airdropped, demanding that Germany desist in its extermination campaigns. You didn't do any of that. Nor did the overwhelming majority of countries in Europe where Nazism, Jew hatred was a legislated reality long before World War II started. My parents' generation died helplessly in the pits. Yes, my daughter's generation are also in the pits. And it's once again, but this time we fight back as independent, self-armed, and defiant Jews to the Jew haters and the Nazified Biden administration, who will soon be completely controlled by modern-day Nazis, the inheritors of the Hitler ethic, who have been unleashed by virtue of October 7th, unleashed by a national nod from the White House. We say to you all, we will carefully defeat our enemies, but we will defeat them. We say that the people of Gaza will be as responsible for their unanimously celebrated creation as the people of Germany were for the Third Reich, the people of Japan for its imperial monsters, the people of the Confederacy for its infestation of slavery and Jim Crow. That was British slavery, by the way. We're done bleeding. Now we're leading, and our destination is to scramble beyond the crossroads of extinction. Now I switch from the war against Hamas to the war to survive this week and maybe even next week on the street corners of America, London, and indeed throughout the still civilized world. London, a Jewish woman was banned from her longtime gym because she used her finger to draw a Jewish star on her steamed up shower door. The gym didn't want anyone to be offended. The UN, Reem Assalam, the UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls, gave an interview just a few days ago, earlier this week, in which she said she was shocked to learn that more than 15,000 rockets had been fired at Israel from Hamas and Hezbollah. She was shocked and encouraged someone to report that. That's a quote. In the USA, the University of California at Berkeley was the scene of another anti-Jewish riot, this time against a Jewish student event at the Zellerbach Playhouse. Police had to evacuate the attendees through side doors and lower floors, and their speaker as well, after some 200 Palestinian thugs broke through the doors. During the riot, the thugs chanted, "Jew, Jew, Jew." Sounds pretty Nazi to me. The litigation continues. Earlier this week, the Office of Civil Rights opened investigations of no fewer than 5 more schools. Illinois Wesleyan University in Bloomington, Illinois, Middlebury College in Vermont, another investigation at UC Berkeley, plus Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, and SUNY Rockland Community College in Suffern, New York. Here is where the Jewish community is completely unprepared for what is happening. Yes, we need the lawsuits. Yes, we need the letters to the editor. Yes, we need the Edwin Black lectures. We need new websites. But the Arab Nazis who have brought their timeless Arab street to American cities do not care about petitions and papers. They are expert at disruption and street violence. And it's not spontaneous anymore. It is planned, coordinated, scheduled, and waged against ordinary Americans, our Jewish citizens, and their allies anywhere. This is how it works. The Jews write a petition, and the Arab Nazis surround the petitioners at the grocery store, at their synagogue, in the schools, and anywhere that they can amplify their vague numbers and their nuisance and fake a groundswell of anti-Israel sentiment. In fact, 80% or more of the American public continues to support Israel's war against genocide, war against Hamas, and war to survive. And plenty of Jewish leaders are trying to focus on that. But folks, you're focusing on the wrong number. That's the wrong majority. The new generation, the 18 to 24-year-olds, Generation Zombie, and those who infuse them with the nutrients of hate and factual fakery. This up-and-coming group, this group that will ascend the hill after you and I have descended the hill. This TikTok all schlock, mindless walk, and Orwellian talk generation that has forsaken the tablets of God for the tablets of Google. They will inherit our earth and will become the enforcers of false, the next insane generation to run the world, and the number of cars in your garage will no longer be a status symbol as much as a designation of your place in a crowded boxcar coming to you. Hear me, America. Hear me, world. Hear me, Jews. Armed with your sharp pencils and stacked papers. You think it's hard now? Hard's coming. And now, I take your questions and I'm loaded. And I'm happy to do so. All right, first question here from the watch party in the villages. Now, I don't know why I always choose the villages first. They're nice people. Do you oppose or support the bipartisan border bill? And can you explain why? The bipartisan border bill, I do oppose it. It is a fake improvement to the southern border. I prefer either the original H.R. 2 or the current law as it currently existed before it was dismantled by Joe Biden. The so-called bipartisan act, which has been strongly criticized by all segments of the community and even the Democratic community. It funds left-wing NGOs, and it creates a new lawless normal of 5,000 a day, which is thousands more than we ever had prior to this current administration. We must always remember the video is not going away of Joe Biden saying, quote, let's surge the border.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are.
And that's exactly what they did. I know many of you saw the picture of the guy crossing over into Texas today wearing a shirt saying Biden and Harris. And so it's always important to understand that it's better to have no deal than a bad deal. And the devil is in the details. Next, from the Watch Party in Newton, what will be the determining factor in the election, Trump or Biden? It's going to come down to this. Mainly, not entirely, but mainly, will the country be so bad off that so many people feel that their situation and their community is so bad off that they will hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump? It's as simple as that. A lot of people will vote for Donald Trump just because they see their country and their lives crumbling. Now look at the African American community. The African American community was at about 8 to 13% Republican, and Republicans from Bush era were trying to nudge that up to 12 and 13%. It's now 28%. And here's something you don't know about the African American community. Many in the African American community are actually Africans. They're Congolese. They are Ghanaians. They are people from Central Africa, and they're living and working here, and they're citizens, and they have a right to vote. And many of these people that I talked to are very staunchly pro-Trump. The same for Afro-Caribbeans. We're talking about Jamaicans. We're talking about Haitians. We're talking about all sorts of Caribbeans who are now dwelling in the continental United States or in other parts of the American Caribbean. And I hear it. These guys support Trump. Plus the new generation of African Americans. They want to think for themselves. They want to make their own decisions. And so suburban women and people in Minnesota and people in Georgia will look around and they will say, is the world better? Is Ukraine better? Is Israel better? Is the economy better? Is my school better? Is the border better? Or have I had enough? I hold my nose. I vote for Donald Trump. That's the answer. Question 3 now. Watch Party in Chicago. Who is the Illinois judge who barred Trump from the ballot? Now, this is really something. One of the worst judges in one of the worst courts in the land made one of the worst decisions to go beyond and undermine our democracy. So the name of the judge is Cook County Circuit Court Judge Tracy Porter. Now, this is one of the most corrupt courts that I have ever seen. In order to get to be a judge on this court, you have to be slated. You have to be slated by the party bosses, generally on the south side of Chicago. And once they slate you, you owe your allegiance to the party bosses and to your specific alderman. In this particular case, this was not a well-established judge. This was not a high-ranking judge. This was, ready for this, a traffic court judge. That's right. I'm now going to read from the official Cook County Democratic website. Eve, take this down. It's www.cookcountydems.com. cookcountydems.com / Cook County Circuit Court Tracy Porter. And it says, Judge Porter currently sits in the traffic division in the Richard J. Daley Center in downtown Chicago, where she presides over minor traffic violations. That is the Cook County Democratic Party. Let me tell you something else about this court system. This is actually a genocidal court system. It was this system under the municipal court that participated at a rapacious rate in the forced surgical sterilization and eugenic affliction of tens of thousands of Illinois boys and Illinois girls, and even participated from afar in the infamous and genocidal Buck versus Bell decision. For some reason, the local municipal court, which doesn't even deal with law, it only deals with ordinances because there are no laws in the city of Chicago. Those are legislated by the state. It is ordinances, traffic violations, and of the sort. This type of insane jurisprudence pushed itself into the history books by leading the charge of the eugenic assault on tens of thousands of Americans. Thank you for the question, Chicago. And of course, as you know, the Supreme Court voted 9-0 to slap this down. But, I think it's the greatest argument for presidential immunity. And not just the President of the United States past, but the President of the United States current and the President of the United States next. We have 300 million people in this country, and one of them, just one, has got to be exempt and immune from prosecution. And the legislated remedy, according to the Constitution, is impeachment. And to do otherwise would be double jeopardy. And that's regardless of what anyone argues. That is my personal opinion. Susanna from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Do you believe the secret informant against Hunter Biden is guilty or at least compromised due to his recent indictment by the Department of Justice? And you're talking about a guy called Smirnoff. And this is the guy who claimed that Hunter and Joe were both taking $5 million bribes. He had been paid $750,000 by the FBI. He was paid to tell the truth. His work was constantly reviewed, constantly vindicated, and that's why he paid it. Then suddenly he is arrested. He is charged with lying about this. And when he's out on bail, he is rearrested for being a flight risk. When you look at an FBI that has committed so many crimes against the American people, including trying to trap Martin Luther King, including the planting of evidence in computer logs against Donald Trump in the fake Russia. No, I don't believe the FBI when suddenly they say we're going to indict one of the star witnesses. He's not the only witness. They have many other witnesses, and they have thousands of bank records and other documents that demonstrate where the cash flows are. But as soon as I saw that, I realized that there was a strong potential that yet another miscarriage of justice was done. Wes in Willow Creek, how close are we to civil war? Well, civil war, as we know it, and as you're asking it, is not determined by a rabid disagreement. That's called democracy, when people disagree. But when the lines of authority are in conflict, then you have the Civil War. And depending upon how much conflict we see in that matter, then you know just how advanced is your Civil War. Now, we're actually witnessing the active Civil War that you're asking me about. It's in one place, and that's in Texas, where the state of Texas has advanced their own authority over and to the exclusion of the federal government. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled that the razor wire that Texas has put up can be removed by the federal government, but it has not ruled that the Texas Department of Military must allow the federal government in. And 10 different states have now sided with Texas, have sent in their National Guards and other law enforcement officers to support Texas against the United States border policy. Now, that's the beginnings of something real. Now, what could have really thrown this out really bad? I think, and it's speculation that is no longer grounded, but I think that if the Supreme Court or anyone had been sustained in saying that they couldn't vote for a given individual, for whatever reason, legitimate or not, trumped up or not, exaggerated or not, due process or not, so many millions of people, approximately 80 million plus, would have felt that they were disenfranchised. I can't imagine what they would have done, what election they would have honored. People would have just said what they said when George Bush got elected. He's not my president. When Donald Trump got elected, he's not my president. And so we came very close. Now, that did not happen. But I think that the legal actions against Donald Trump have convinced most Americans that he is the victim of a legal campaign. There's a constitutional clause in Article 8 against undue fines. It's right next to cruel and unnatural punishment, undue fines and confiscation. And when we see $325 million plus push it all the way to $400 million, that's $500 million of a fine for a victimless crime, of a crime that's never been enforced or tried, where a guy made his lenders wealthy and now he's being robbed of everything that he has in terms of New York property. I think the ruling is yet to be made on that. And by the way, the same would go for Biden. Can you imagine that Biden is in his last January and he passes through some Texas locality and somebody decides to charge him with reckless driving or anything that they might want to charge the guy with? There has to be one guy with immunity. Melanie in Jacksonville, do you believe the latest crime stats showing reduction in crime? No. Here's how it works. I used to be a crime reporter in Chicago. It's an old story. The chief of police calls in the district commanders and say, you've got to reduce the level of these crime stats. And so the cops on the beat who could be arresting people suddenly stop arresting people. And if the prosecutors are going to downgrade the charges against those who are being arrested, and if felonies are becoming misdemeanors and misdemeanors are becoming petty offenses, all of a sudden, everything downgrades. That's what it's all about. That's how you manipulate the crime stats. On top of it, many cities are not reporting all the crime stats, and the FBI is doing an acknowledged lousy job of gathering the information. So the crime stats can be what they want. They can turn them up and turn them down. There's actually a department at Northwestern University which establishes it's a kind of a traffic engineering group that for a long time established what they call the ticket quotas. So they always knew there was a certain amount of felony speeding, drunk driving, and they said, if you're not catching 40 guys a day, then you're not doing your job. But they all know that 40 guys a day is just a drop in the bucket. And so they surge enforcement. They can raise the enforcement, but as soon as they raise the enforcement, the number of arrests and prosecutions grow. So it's an ebb and flow. That's the answer to your question. Peter and Marcia in Los Angeles. When you hear follow the scientific consensus, do you agree or disagree? Okay. No, of course I disagree. The most important thing is to challenge the scientific consensus. That is the essence of science. And, Greta Thunberg convinced me that the climate crazies who have now allowed Nazism to flow within their ranks, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, these people can't be trusted for a consensus. And I don't think there's an astrophysicist anywhere on the planet who will say that there's a consensus about the creation of the universe and the makeup of the universe and how it works. And plus, remember this, you look at scientists and like MIT, which is a center of great science, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And what do we see? That MIT has become a cesspool of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel agitation. And I know through the research that I've done that this mentality leaks over into its scientific conduct. And so, no, I don't trust the scientific consensus. We learned as much during COVID as the rules on COVID changed from county to county, from day to day, from city to city, and from street to street. And now they tell us that COVID is nothing more than a flu. And if we don't have a fever, we can just wash our hands and go outside. So thank you for your question. Stephen in Baltimore, what will be the benefits of climate change? Now, I know you had this question before. I should have answered it, but I'm going to answer it now. We have a lot to benefit from climate change. First of all, climate change is here. It's real. It's genuine. It's undeniable. The Earth is continuing its climate evolution as it has millennium after millennium. But we will have better and more production of food, feed a starving planet. And that includes Africa and lower income areas. And we will have, due to receded Arctic and Antarctic regions, receded ice, we will have the ability to transit that food across the northern and southern tiers to get that food to where it's needed. So that's going to be very, very important. We can also reverse a century of reckless development where we put houses on the seashores and on the mountaintops and on the hillsides when they had no business being there. And we may even have to look at such places as New Orleans, which is underwater. But the fact is, we've done a lot of remediation in New Orleans. So I'm not going to trust the fake science of the climate crazies, including Greta Thunberg. In fact, I want my friends in the climate movement to know this out there in San Francisco Bay and on the East Coast, knowing that I spent years of my life crisscrossing the United States trying to achieve climate reform. I want you to know that it was Greta Thunberg who single-handedly convinced me that this is a movement that could not be trusted for its science, and especially when it began discrediting the scientific achievements of Jewish climatologists. By the way, you might be interested to know that when I was in college, one of my four main areas of study was meteorology. It went along with physical geography. So I've always been fascinated by the weather and fascinated by its interaction with humankind and all other life forms. And another indicator of just how stupid the climate crazies are was heard today from the prince of climate craziness, and that would be John Kerry. I suppose Greta Thunberg is the princess of climate craziness. John Kerry just stated that the world might think kindlier of Russia's invasion if Putin could reduce his emissions. Here's the exact quote. You can check this. Quote, if Russia wanted to show good faith, they could go out and announce what their reductions are and going to be and make a greater effort to reduce emissions now. Continuing in the quote, maybe that would open the door for people to feel better about what Russia is choosing to do at this point in time. This is the United States government's lead guy on climate. I just heard Representative Ro Khanna on television. I'm not sure if it was CNN or Fox. And he said there's no way he can justify this irrational comment. Thank you about that. Denise in Los Angeles. Who is the sailor kissing a woman in Times Square, and why was this photo banned by the Department of Veterans Affairs? Okay, so the freak of nature at the Department of Veteran Affairs who declared the famous picture of the sailor kissing a woman in Times Square that was photographed by Alfred Eisenstadt, but there are several other views of that. And this woman, her name is Rima Ann O. Nelson, Assistant Undersecretary for Health Operations. And by the way, she headed up the department's St. Louis Hospital for more than 3 years, I checked her, during which time the facility was rated the #1 worst in the country, with patients allegedly left in their feces for days, and with more than 1,800 of our precious veterans exposed to HIV and hepatitis from its unsterilized dental equipment. Well, this policy met with so much outrage. Nobody asked the hundreds of thousands of men who fought in World War II and in other wars whether this iconic picture should be taken away. And the head of the Department of Veteran Affairs, Dennis McDonough, quickly intervened and said, quote, let me be clear, this image is not banned from VA facilities, and we will keep it in VA facilities. Now, let me get to the reason why I'm guessing she wanted this. It looks like, and is often alleged to be, a non-consensual kiss. So let's look into this non-consensual kiss. First of all, there are at least 2 major pictures of the same sailor kissing the same woman. No one's been really sure who this couple is. Many decades ago, when I was working for the Time Life Group, there was always the question of who was the actual sailor and who was the actual woman. Now, it's been largely identified. I've got a list of these guys. It's been largely identified to be George Mendoza, and he spells it Mendonsa, Mendonsa, and a woman called Friedman, who was a dental assistant. But other people have claimed to be the actual kissers. Carl Muscarello was officially endorsed by a scientific review as being the official kisser. Glenn McDuffie was evaluated by the Houston Police Department forensic artist as being the guy in question. There have been lawsuits, invasion of privacy, copyright. There's a lot of guys running around saying, I did the kissing, and some other woman was being the kissed person. Let me tell you something else. This was the end of the most monstrous war, where every day, over 6,000 Jews were being massacred and exterminated in death camps. Every day, men and women were being sunk in fighting on the high seas, in the air. People were being bombed. Battles were being fought. This was the real war to end all wars. It wasn't World War I, although many people can say it was World War I. That was the worst of the wars. But this was the monster war. And let me tell you something else. When the American GIs, and I've seen the footage, and I've spoken to the actual individuals, came down the streets of the villages of Normandy, they were kissed left and right by women, old and young. There was such a sense of celebration. And the fact that a freak of nature would have made this decision unilaterally, without discussion, without consideration for what it meant, is just another striking example of the debasement of this administration. This is the same administration which just a couple days ago, under State Department Secretary Antony Blinken, said we will no longer refer to the brave men and women of the United States military. We can't use the word men and women. So this is part of what is driving the election. Are people going to look around and say, this is the straw that breaks my voting back? And that is what will decide it. And it won't be anything done today. And it won't be anything done following the State of the Union. And it'll all come down to the crunch time as people have a serious conversation with themselves in the voting booth. Murray in Pittsburgh, I'm coming your way on Sunday. Is there any hope for America's colleges as cesspools of anti-Semitism? Well, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is the bane, is the affliction of equality, and has a particularly anti-Jewish bent to it. I've investigated this very, very thoroughly. I can tell you that when you get into numerous clauses, this is a term, numerous clauses. This is what the Jews have always objected to, that a quota system, we've always fought against quotas, whether in Nazi Germany, in England, in the United States, in Kenilworth and the suburbs where I grew up, in the schools in Northwestern University, which had a quota for Jews outside Chicago, in Evanston. We abhor a quota. And this actually harkens to what Martin Luther King says, that we should be judged by the content of our character and nothing else. There is a little bit of help, a little bit of hope. The University of Florida just fired its complete DEI staff, every one of them. The whole budget was fired, was terminated, and I'm guessing that money will go into education. I'm following several lawsuits, which I won't go into, in which in the last couple of days, problematic DEI officials have been suddenly, sometimes 8 o'clock at night, relieved of their responsibilities. So there is hope, but it's a glimmer of hope. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. You can hold for my closing word of wisdom just 1 minute away. But first, I want to thank my esteemed audience. I also thank my talented international team, including Christine in Indiana, Holly and your whole family in Nashville, Wes in San Francisco. Thanks for everything. John in Japan, we love you, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. I and we all owe them. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks, approximately, at 3 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to be a friend of The Edwin Black Show, go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my websites for events. I'm in Wheeling next week. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com/events. And until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple Books, Google Books, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust. You want an autographed copy? Hit my personal, newly redesigned website, edwinblack.com, and click books. You can get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show and click that notification like tens of thousands of others have. You will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. You can follow me at Edwin Black Book on that thing called X, as well as Facebook. And now, for my closing word of wisdom. When I go, I know what I will leave behind for mankind. But what are you leaving behind? Leave something besides consumption. I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless you all.